taxidermy someone while they're technically alive, and they'll shine when it's election time. See, the Democratic voter base will pay them zero. Never mind if voting for the scarecrow is a vote along their party lines. They could stare into its marble eyes and claim there's something dignified. Unlike real politicians, this one doesn't need an oxygen or kit supply. But its function is the same as those who came before. The goals are never misaligned. It still spends all its working time performing pre-recorded fleecing sessions where it sugarcoats your slow and hungry genocide, while pouring billions into Nazi coffers, all the while selling you the story that we're moments till the MiGs arrive. So fuck it, ask Zelensky if he'll help replace our leaded pipes. Watch a fleet of Penske's show stacks of bills in every size. Guess it only took a black sun and a couple Hiles. Honorary goose step and some Nazi boots a quarter mile, all while Biden sneers his sordid smile. I don't know what was in this morning's vial, but it makes him stare 1,000 yards through all the prompters and the cards like he can smell the nearest child. His eyes are wide and wild, wider than the grave in which another 1,000 families were tossed in as I typed until they rose up to the sky unceremoniously piled. Which sort of flies right in the face of all this network ticker tape where the American economy has superhuman vitals.
And sometimes some people come along with a hammer.
See, I like to think my trial's gonna play like a recital. I'll denounce the world around me and accuse the most entitled, who weaponize their titles, whose pull is something tidal, who'd starve us all to death to best delight their blighted idol. So they might destroy the record, and I will never get to vinyl. So my word is not immortal, but it's final.
It's a brilliant, powerful hammer. It's a brilliant, powerful hammer to smash that facade.
Of the free, and you'll know us by the trail of dead. It's just one more world war to complete the set. When you live by the pike, you die by the pith. You die wide-eyed, still pleading the fifth, or crying divine epithets and pathetic attempts at defense. All empathetic for those on your side of the fence. Well, I'll gladly put you and your legacy into an alternate tense of faltering senses and altered events. Like hun, it ain't a hearse, it's a reaper's stretch. Ah, how sweet, she said. Bunch of hordes in the street like it's Evil Dead. Where the thin blue line meets razor's edge. And where the corporate ladder ascends to a steel-toed boot that awaits on the ledge. You'll be licking it fresh at your boss's request till it stomps each finger and watches you fall to your death. And drown in an ocean of debt. Gone with the fodder who gathered to honor the patient left, who purity tested themselves into sections, step by step, till the next election, when it's just one them and the sound of their well-read theorized breath. That's harm reduction for the lowly cost of you holding your nose and just openly buying the theft. Maybe that's all in the flick of the pen. Maybe we're all one unmarked van from to the pen, being guarded by pigs who exist on a diet of dying breaths of much worthier men. Honey, heaven's expecting you. Just don't get too hung up on who they let in. Just look up at the shine of the pearly gates. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the paint. You don't need to worry if there's lead in the water, lead in the milk, lead in the honey, lead in the caustic embrace of the Heavenly Father. Lead is the flavor of passive perpetual slaughter. Lead is the taste of us led to the ledge by the lure of the legend of expert consensus, and then beckon to stretch it just one step farther. And I hope all the folks who were boastfully gloating and toasting themselves as the heroes of COVID for boosting their boosters and doing their part are now equally thrilled to be starstruck martyrs. All laid in a government grave with anonymous markers, like you're back from the carvers and off to the splicer. You're the very first wave to be slain in the war against Pfizer. That 100 years war against Pfizer. They are thinning the crowd that is striking right now to bleed adequate pay from those inhuman misers who all sit in their office and designate coffins to people regarded as nothing but profit for Kaiser. Still the Dems want you nicer. Dems want you softer. Dems want you kinder. Yeah, they all want you graciously starving in silence. You will speak when you're spoken to. Rest of the time, you and all of us peasants are merely depressing statistics neglected in Congress's binders. All bled, bone dry, then fed to the grinder. Our headstones line each step as reminders. That's a lesson in object permanence learned in the furnace by workers consigned to the fire. Workers bled, bone dry, then fed by the fed to the grinder. By the fed to the grinder. Now the fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Now the fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, bleeds you dry, then dines on the dead. The fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside and you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. Here's where our leaders would see us all led. The fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see that it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your wealth into bread for itself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Fed went straight to your head. Mind what you hide and your sighs unsaid, and your eyes turn blind to the signs unread. Flag bright red, so you let it in bed. You let it inside, you'll see it, it's fed. Never you mind that it grinds your mind, that it grinds yourself, then it bleeds you dry, then it dines on the dead. Here's where our leaders would see us all led.
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days and to still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to save. And when they told you everything was safe, were you safe? Were you safe? Were you safe? Were you safe? guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days, and I still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to say. And when they told you everything was safe, were you safe? Were you safe? Were you safe? Were you safe?
Fresh off the masses, the brand new cancerous growth, who has come here to vie for your vote. Come here to cry at the camps and to mourn at the shore for the bodies that float by the wreck of an immigrant boat. Then it's back to their luxury home, couple security booths and a moat. Couple cigars, little escargot, little booze and a soak. Just breathe in the steam and the smoke. Pink salt, lavender, candles are low. Shit, when you do what you do, gotta lighten the load. And he got a life of his own that's a sight to behold. And it's a lot to control, to decipher the code or to siphon the soul. The cost of a good night's sleep for the working elite is a bargain, no matter the toll. Worth any wager, and that comes straight from the mouth of the means to the goal that will swallow us whole. Ripe for the picking if you don't mind mold, and you know I don't. Maybe we're pleasantly prone, maybe we're taking a licking, compliantly ticking and ticking, but never explode. No, I don't deliver the prettiest image, but damn if it isn't an accurate vision of natural fission, of rage at the system and abject heartbreak, patiently waiting for any who will listen. That little blue bird who was watching your words is a federal carrier pigeon, a Langley first. It's a patient observer who hears what it wants and is trained for the worst. Oh, you got nothing to hide. They'll be the ones to decide that after they root through your purse, after they read all your text, after they raid your apartment, confiscate all of its contents, then conjure up evidence out of the air on a wing and a prayer and malicious intelligence nonsense. Any presumption of innocence long since gone, right along with your comforts and constants. Historically first they will come for the communists. So why in the fuck would I say I'm a communist? Well, it might be I love my community more than the monsters of opulence who are holding us hostage, who are vomiting promises. Might be I'm all done seeing our pensions and benefits harvested. Might be I'm all done watching the populace being disarmed in the guise of an armistice. Watching a woman collapse on the floor who will rise no more. She is wheeled out the door and you're next in line for the pharmacist. If you can get me to vote, it's a hard no confidence. But part of the charm of deception is politics wearing the mask of incompetence. It's all in the art of austerity, darling. It's all in the slide of the providence. Until home is as wide as your cubicle height and is only as deep as your coffin is. Maybe I'm miles away from impatience, aching to break off the head of the snake where the capital lust, reptile brain, and the margin of profit is. Like off with his. Like off with his.
I guess this isn't such an awful place. Is that what you want me to say? You prove it's possible to sleep for days, and I still think you're right here awake. The cost of living isn't much to make, but God, it's so hard to say.
What's up, everybody? It's another episode of Iron and News, a very special episode.
Hey.
I'm here with my co-host, Collin Radix-Carter, aka Care Bear, and below us is the all-powerful Robert Durden, everyone. You know,
Hey.
hopefully he
Welcome
won't
back,
pour,
Rob.
like, chemicals on your hand like he did in the movie, you know?
No guarantees.
No guarantees. Anyway, how's everyone doing this evening? You doing all right? Everyone doing good?
Well,
Hopefully.
it's great to have Rob back. You were one of our first guests when we started this a year ago, so we had to come full circle and have you back on again. So, but it's been a minute. So if you don't mind sharing with our audience, which has now grown since the last time you've been on, what you've been up to and just play catch up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for having me. It seems only appropriate that I be back on your 1 year anniversary. Congratulations, by the way.
Thank
I've
you.
been good. I had to step back a little bit from PFC because I had a kid, and there's been some like rearranging of the house. My mom moved in with us because she had a stroke, and so we have her living in the basement now, and that's where I used to shoot my show. But yeah, I'm getting back into it, and I don't do much on YouTube nowadays. I'm actually starting to find that Rumble is doing quite well as far as
Yeah.
numbers go. I set up that my Rumble account like years ago and never got many views, but then I went back and checked recently, and I'm getting decent views on some old videos, and then the two new ones I just put up are getting hundreds. So that's pretty good for me. That's almost on YouTube level. So it's been good. I'm looking forward to get back into it. I'm not going to use YouTube very much anymore, though. I'll tell you that much.
Those views on Rumble, they're fake views, man. They're fake views.
Is that so?
Views.
I don't.
For us, it seems Reef is
There's
still
just zero engagement. If you're on Rumble, like, let me know you're there. Like, let me know you're a real person. Just, pop in the chat, pop in the comments, leave a like, do something. Like, yeah, we're getting great numbers there too, but like,
Yeah, the
no.
likes are definitely low for sure. Or
Yeah.
the Rumbles. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's weird.
Or
But
the
either way,
comments,
it's still better than
nothing.
YouTube.
There's no one in chat. Yes, luckily they don't censor us as hard. Same with Rockfin. We're there. There
Yeah,
says
that's
two
where I'm
people
gonna do
watching
most.
over there.
Yeah, that's where I'm gonna do most of my uploading is Rumble and Rockfin kind of split, and I'm gonna continue to do my book club on YouTube because that seems to be the only thing I don't get banned for. Although I did get a strike, I got a strike on one of my chapters in the book Dreamland I was just reading,
Mhm.
and it was for I was talking about how I don't even want to say it out loud because I don't want you guys to get in trouble, but I'll just kind of I'll gloss over it just a little bit here. It was talking about how Purdue Pharma got sued for peddling OxyContin as being non-addictive. And I just stopped in the middle of my reading and I was like, it'd be real shame if that happened to Pfizer in the near future. And I got strike for that too. So I've gotten now a total of like 8 or 9 strikes on YouTube. My channel's crippled, so I'm not going to upload anything on there. And I'm not going to stop in the middle of my chapters to give my opinion anymore because apparently they catch that 5-second clip there and they'll still give me a strike. So,
Right. It's rough out there. Anyway, we brought some stories this evening.
Yeah.
If we want to go into those, there we go. So you brought a couple.
I brought a couple. So Vice President Kamala Harris is traveling in Africa at the moment. So we're going to talk about, especially talking about the US Africa Summit that happened in the fall, just the implications of her being there. And we're going to hear from a familiar person who we'll share later regarding that summit and its implications, with Africa currently. And then this is more of an update from last week. So I reported that the LA Unified School District went on strike for 3 days. And they reached a deal. But I do have a question as to whether that deal was good, essentially. So we'll talk more about that. And then, Reef, what do you got?
Well, I brought the lesser of two evils. Joe Biden. We'll see if Joseph is in fact lesser in that regard. Maybe not. We'll see. And U is for uranium bombs. I know people have been paying attention. Those are now being used. in the Ukraine front. So we'll see what people say about that. That's an interesting story for sure. But anyway, if anyone remembers that SpongeBob reference I make, but I'm the only one apparently that's ever watched SpongeBob among us.
No,
so.
it's just no. We make no. That's inside story. Like I did not grow up watching That was slightly. Well, I was in college. I started college when SpongeBob came out. So, and I didn't have Nickelodeon when I was in college, so there would have been no way to watch it when I was in college, and I just never got into it. So sorry.
Yep.
Like, you were a kid, so that was different. So, but yeah, I just never got into it. So I don't get a lot of these SpongeBob references. So yeah, I'm a boomer in that regard. I think that's what Reef was low key trying to say.
Yeah.
So it's
we're
okay.
both just old fogies. It's okay. It's okay. You're gonna be forced to watch eventually.
Okay, sure.
Insanity reigns. F is for fire that burns down the whole town. Yes, see, someone gets it. Someone knows what I'm referencing. N is for no survivors, in fact. U is for uranium bombs. It's a great song. People should know it. But anyway, let's get into your story.
So let's talk about Kamala going to Africa, shall we?
Sure.
So I'd rather not, but because Africa is very special to me, we must talk about it. So let's play this first. So CBS did a very brief segment on her traveling there. So we'll watch that, have an article to kind of go through, and then, as I said, we're going to have a familiar person who I've referenced before have some things to say regarding, the US-Africa Summit, which took place back in November, and the implications of that in relation to Kamala being in Africa now. So, Reef, if you don't mind playing.
No.
First.
This. Oh, I get to do my new thing.
Yes,
Rob, we have a new thing. So usually with things like this, even though we're completely using it under fair use, CBS doesn't like us playing their videos, or NBC or MSNBC or anything like that. So I decided to go back in time before the days of copyright. Just like this. Look at that. How about that? Isn't that nice?
It is.
Isn't that nice?
You're a genius.
I hope so.
We'll see.
Vice President Kamala Harris is in Ghana today as part of a week-long visit to Central Africa.
The vice president will also travel to Tanzania and then Zambia as U.S. continues to expand its ties with the continent.
Harris's visit is meant to focus on economic development, climate change, food security, and a rapidly rising youth population in Africa. She spoke highly of Ghanaian President Nana Akufo-Addo and expressed her excitement to discuss the future of the continent with him and its other leaders.
We will build on the previous meetings I have had with each of them to strengthen democracy and good governance, promote peace and security, build on long-term economic growth, and strengthen our business ties.
CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland joins us now, not from there, but from the White House. Scott, is Harris's visit a direct response to China's recent investment and growing influence in the continent?
Yeah, well, the vice president was asked just that question during a joint press conference with President Akufo-Addo a few moments ago, and she said, no, that this is a strategic issue for the U.S. to develop a relationship with Africa amid concerns about security and in the name of building stronger relationships worldwide. But this isn't just a pivotal moment in U.S.-Chinese relations. This is a seminal moment, and China has been investing deeply in Africa, building billions of dollars of new infrastructure, providing resources for African nations as China keeps an eye on all the natural resources available in Africa. In the U.S., making its own investment to foster a stronger relationship during what is clearly a tenuous moment, not just in U.S.-Chinese relations, but Tony and Lilia, tenuous moments in the African economies, including in Ghana, where COVID-19 ravaged their economy, hurt with jobs, hurt with inflation, and the Ukraine war with Russia is starving resources from Africa as they try to develop big industry. So this is a pivotal moment for the vice president to be there.
Well, so I'm going to be curious to know, and this is a tough to answer, but I'll put it out there anyway. Would we be making this trip, our government, the Biden administration, in the absence of China making such a push itself for influence in the region?
Yeah, it's a good open-ended question, but let's add Russia to this as well, with Russia also having a foothold in Africa. Economically and strategically, it's also a pretty pivotal moment for U.S.-Russian relations. But it's also important to note that the former president's critics, former President Trump's critics, say he damaged these relationships by making a vulgar reference to African nations in 2018, and it's incumbent, as critics would say, on the Biden administration to rebuild those bridges, figuratively, and rebuild those relationships.
All right, Scott McFarland, thank you for taking the time.
That was fucking terrible, dude.
Son of a bitch. Rob, I know you have comments.
Oh, God. Dude, there's so many jokes. Like she couldn't have been more patronizing if she were wearing a kente cloth going out there. She goes and she starts going with this long run-on sentence. She speaks like Obama, where she's like putting all these like flowery words out there. And it's painful to watch. I actually made a joke on Twitter when I heard this was happening. I was like, this is a really, really good way to speed up Africa-China relations, is just to send Kamala Harris over there, because she's just going to embarrass everybody. And if I may, I'm going to go on substance here. She's talking about how, we can improve our relationship. And she talks about security there, which I'll tell you what she went and did. She doesn't go down there the same way the Chinese do and say, listen, how can we help you with your infrastructure? What do you need that we can help you with our trading apparatus? She goes down there and she goes, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You're going to install a bunch of these multinational corporations that operate out of the U.S. in your country. Otherwise, we're going to do to you what we did to Libya. And we all know what happened there. By the way, and then last comment there, that's why I was laughing about the Trump thing. It's like, oh, well, these, of course, the relations with Africa were totally, screwed up because Trump was talking about how they're shithole countries or whatever, completely glossing over the obvious fact that like Libya happened under Obama.
Don't be
so
rude.
It's like, yeah, right. So it's like it's weird. That guy, the really super, like cartoon white guy that was trying to explain all this. Of course, he's going to go in there and he's going to somehow shoehorn Russia and Trump into his answer.
But funny how he mentioned that Russia is basically starving Africa.
Uh-huh.
Wait, do you remember a certain article that I referenced last week?
Yes.
That is not the case.
Yeah.
If anything, Russia
they've been helping that. Yes, they've been, yeah.
So check that clip.
Out,
wrong.
Just wrong. Like,
yeah. So, yeah, I'm going to tear, I guess the same as Scott. I'm going to tear him one within the next few minutes. So anyway, so Politico also reported on this. This is written by Eugene Daniels, where he talks more specifics regarding Kamala Harris's tour in Africa. And he writes, and let me catch this up. Sorry. There we go.
There you go.
For Vice President Kamala Harris's first trip in office to Africa, the goal is nothing less than a resetting of relations between the United States and the countries she's scheduled to visit. Fearing that China has gained a huge economic foothold on the continent, the Biden administration is trying to not just loosen that grip, but encourage more American businesses to invest in African nations. Harris's arrival Sunday marks the latest, most high-profile effort to achieve those ends. She is the fifth top Biden administration official to visit Africa this year.
Fifth? Okay.
That's not including Biden, who hasn't gone over there yet. She is the fifth top Biden administration. UN Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield and Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen came in January. First Lady Jill Biden visited in February, and Secretary of State Anthony Blinken made the trip earlier this month. President Joe Biden plans to visit later in the year. Geez, within the last 3 months, we've had 5 administration representatives have visited the continent. Gee, I wonder what's going on. Anyway, in Ghana, Harris's primary focus is on elevating the nation's youth, and she noted the median age of Africans is 19.
But why did she go see Rosario Dawson and Idris Elba there? Why was that part of the... Anyway, continue.
What that tells us about the growth of opportunities, of innovation, possibilities, I see in all of that great opportunity, not only for people of this continent, but for people of the world. What does that mean? Harris told a crowd of dignitaries, dancers, drummers, and school children who had greeted her. But Ghana isn't her only audience. Harris will also spend time in Tanzania and Zambia over her 7 days on the continent. She'll hold bilateral meetings with the leaders of each of the 3 nations, visit Ghana's Cape Coast slave castle, and make announcements about public-private sector investments. The trip is intended to make good on the administration's commitments from December at the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit, which we
covered. Not that great.
But extensively.
Extensively give us your resources and get nothing for it was essentially, if I remember correctly. Okay.
But for Harris, the first Black U.S. Vice President, it also carries especially high stakes. Her task will be to convince the African nations that the United States wants to truly invest in the future of countries here and help change the narrative for Americans and encourage more business incentives. For decades, the perception of the U.S. has been that it treats African countries like charity cases, according to several regional experts. That was exacerbated during the Trump administration, which largely ignored the continent or reportedly disparaged it. Former President Donald Trump in the 2018 meeting referred to some African nations as shithole countries. At the time, China enhanced its investments in Africa, helping to build roads and other infrastructure projects and creating firmer economic and political relations. Washington is playing catch up with Africa, said Cameron Hudson, a senior associate at the Center for Strategic and International Studies Africa program. With all the business investment that the Chinese have made comes a lot of leverage and political influence in those countries. It's not just them making money there, it's that they now have skin in the game in Africa in ways that we don't. And that gives them leverage that we don't have. So basically saying a quiet proud out loud, basically being like, we want some of what China is doing. But experts say the Biden administration has an opportunity to now compete with China as more African leaders see their relationship with China as a new form of exploitation, said H. Peter Ham, the former special envoy of the
Sahel region.
It's kind of blurry there, so thank you. Region of Africa during the Trump administration. A lot of Africans have woken up to realize how often in these large construction projects, infrastructure, they don't employ Africans. They even ship in their own labor oftentimes, Pham said. Which I will say is true. Having lived there, it is true. That being said, I have to argue, what is the US going to do that's any better than the Chinese? If anything, it'll be just more of the same shit of, yeah, we'll put in the infrastructure in this country, but we're going to hire our own people in the continent to do the work in lieu of the African labor that's already there. That's what I'm going to guess is more likely going to happen if they go follow through, or if these countries kind of go along with whatever platitudes that Kamala will kind of give them in terms of, relationship, or in this case, whatever you want to call it, like democracy, relationship, whatever they want to say as a means to kind of infiltrate Africa and its resources. But anyway.
Anything to add, Rob? Or is Collin just wanting to steamroll?
No,
Go ahead.
no. I don't really have much to add. I think you're exactly right. If the United States gets their way, is they'll just have a bunch of multinational corporations come in and build that infrastructure, but they're not going to build roads. They're going to build McDonald's and Starbucks, and then they'll,
ways for us to make money. Yeah.
Yeah, and the reason they bring up this, like, that the Chinese are going to bring in cheaper labor than they would normally pay the African, that's exactly what would happen with the US as well, except for the Chinese are going to come in and build all sorts of infrastructure because they believe that if you help out a people and you build literal inroads with them and build bridges with them, that they'll be good trading partners and it'll help you economically in the future. Whereas the United States just does it if at the behest of whatever multinational corporation wants to exploit the resources there. I don't know if you guys have ever, and I won't go down this rabbit hole too far, but like 1954 Guatemala, the United Fruit Company, basically they controlled the entire country. They controlled all the politicians, and it was basically because of the exports of bananas that they had a monopoly on, and it turned out horrible for the workers. They actually killed a bunch of striking workers with their police force. It was nasty. So they want, if the US goes in there and builds infrastructure, it's at the behest of some sort of multinational corporation, and that won't end well for anybody.
Banana Republic, right?
Exactly right. Yep, that's exactly right.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Let's continue.
Yeah, you need to do that. So like I have to show you the thing, and then you can. That's how it works, right?
I had to pin your screen. The Biden administration has tried to paint its Africa policy as one based in long-lasting relationships instead of a larger move to counter China and choke off economic support for Russia. But administration officials acknowledge that those global rivals do not factor into their view of current U.S.-Africa policy. Obviously, we can't ignore the current geopolitical moment. It's no secret that we are engaged in competition with China. And we said very clearly we intend to outcompete China in the long term, said a senior administration official who spoke on a call with reporters ahead of the trip. Harris's visit, the official said, is intended to prove that America has an affirmative agenda for the continent, one that change the tenor of the relationship. And it's funny that they don't go into any specifics at all as to what they are going to offer.
Also, so why can't it be like the soprano of the relationship or the baritone of the white tenor of the? Okay, I mean, seems very non-inclusive, Politico. God.
I think I have a little more to this.
Yeah.
In her remarks to the African Leaders Summit in December, Harris previewed a message she expected to lean in over the next week, that the administration would create partnerships across the continent grounded in candor, openness, inclusiveness, shared interests, and mutual benefits, and all this bullshit, and not a whole lot of. And overall, our administration will be guided not by what we can do for Africa, but what we could. Oh, God. My head hurts. Or like, what did she say?
It's just the double CK the entire time. That's all it is.
Let me read this again. Like, an overall administration would be guided not by what we can do for Africa, but what we can do with Africa. Which is what?
And when she says that, she means literally like using them as a tool. That's what she's. Oh, we're gonna do. Yeah. We're gonna grab Africa and do with it what we want.
Oh God.
Yeah, she's right about the candor, though. It's the candor of somebody who's been drinking since 9 a.m.
American businesses do not see Africa in economic terms. Who the fuck told you that? Who? What? Like,
I have a theory on why they sent all of these officials, and this is not a joke. I saw today that Kenya is dropping the petrodollar.
Yes.
So, and then I also saw something, and this isn't Africa, but it has a lot to do with the petrodollar as well, is that China and Brazil have agreed to do all of their transactions between each other and all their trading outside the petrodollar.
Right.
So what is actually happening, I think the U.S. understands that in Africa, there's going to be a domino effect, very much starting with, I think now Kenya, you'll see a couple other countries to kind of follow suit where they're all playing with the idea of ditching the petrodollar, but they got to do it kind of as one, because they don't want to end up like Libya. That's what happened with Libya. Gaddafi was trying to create the dinar to be like an African currency, and look what they did to him, right? So I think that the United States understands that within the next couple of months, I think multiple African countries are going to start making moves to drop the petrodollar, right?
Right, with
exactly.
with BRICS making sure that they're going to be gold backed and not like,
yes,
while also brokering deals with Saudi Arabia, Iran, like,
yes,
you know,
the writing's on the wall, and the African nations, they see it, the rise of China. And here's the thing, man, it's very hard to like mend these bridges that the United States has burned over the last 50 years or 100 years. You know, they've cooed many of these countries, they've destabilized multiple of them. So how are you going to mend these bridges? I'll tell you, they don't go there and they're not trying to make a deal the way that China's trying to make a deal, trying to help out the countries. They're going down there and they're going wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You try to drop the petrodollar like Gaddafi did, and you'll end up like Gaddafi. That's what they're going to do. And that's what I think Kamala Harris is down there doing right now. And it's not going to work. If anything, it'll accelerate Africa-China relations. Oh, yeah. And that's not the worst thing in the world, because without going too far down the rabbit hole, one of the best things that can happen right now, this very second, is for the petrodollar to lose a lot of its value, because you can't fund World War III with a dead currency. Right. So if BRICS can actually play this waiting game, and the Chinese and the Russians are very, very patient, and they can kind of wait out the United States and keep making these deals, eventually the petrodollar is going to collapse, and then they can avoid World War III, because Raytheon's not going to take their payments in a dead currency. So long story short, I think that Kamala Harris is down there basically kind of threatening them in a way.
Yeah. So actually, let's skip ahead, Reef. I got it. So Rob, I want to introduce you to somebody. So who we're going to hear right now is Dr. Arikana Chimamori-Quao. She is the former representative of the African Union to the U.S. She's based in Zimbabwe now. But she actually kind of talks about a little of what you mentioned in terms of, you know, what Africa should be doing. But actually I've wanted to play this for a while, but I kind of sat on it, but I think it's very appropriate here. So she actually goes into a little bit of, well, this is a long clip, so I split it up. But what she's going to go into here is, as we mentioned, the US-Africa Summit was over in December. She had some thoughts, which also kind of relates to what we're talking about, what Rob, you've mentioned. So we're going to hear the first part where she talks about the US-Africa Summit in particular, and what this administration has to get right in terms of their relationships with Africa.
And it sounds to be, I mean, I think there was a lot of criticism of the last summit like this under President Obama, that there was like no follow through. And, you know, it's one of the big questions I'm asking is, how do you make a big bang summit where everyone comes over? It's like checking off the box and say, okay, we've done Africa, now we can move on to other things. How do you make that something that's a more sustainable and a more continuous engagement of the United States with Africa? And what I'm hearing from you is, frankly, a lot of disappointment and you know, a lot of pessimism about what may come out of this summit.
Well, the point of the matter is, already you know nothing is going to come out of it, because it is a one-sided conversation.
Right.
Where is the agenda? The agenda should have been published way in advance. The African leaders should have been given an opportunity to also state their position, so they can come up with an African position that can then be discussed alongside the American position. So the fact that it is a one-sided conversation, that is yet going to be another useless meeting with no outcomes. But again, I'm going to keep emphasizing, the reason this is happening is because there is a disrespect for the Africans. There is a general feeling that we don't need to hear from the Africans. Their opinions do not matter. Wherein lies the problem. Why were the Africans not consulted? Why were the Africans not part of an agenda? Why was there not even an agenda like what happened during the FOCAC meeting with China. Those are some basic issues. No head of state. President Biden would not pick up and go to meet with any other leader in the world without an agenda. That simply doesn't happen.
Right.
So what makes the US think that they can engage African leaders without an agenda? Come to Washington, let me tell you what I want to do for you. Come to Washington, let me tell you what you need to do in your countries. That game is an old game.
Right.
It's not going to work anymore. To be honest with you, if I'm to speak the truth, I hope a lot of heads of states don't come, because it is an insult. It is an abuse of the African leaders. It's a disrespect of the African leaders. Where is the agenda? Please respect the African leaders. Do unto them what you would want done unto you. So it's really a simple ask.
Let me ask you a question. You mentioned China and how China approaches this. I'm interested in what China gets so right. But is there a blind spot there? Are there problems in the China-Africa relationship from your perspective?
Let me just hit the nail in the head and deal with the 10,000-pound gorilla in the room.
Yeah.
Racism as well plays a very important part. The disrespect of the Africans also goes back to a lot of the people who work in the US government, not all of them, but there's a significant of them who automatically assume that Africans do not know what they're doing. Africans need help. Africans need to be told what to do. And racism is also at the bottom of it all. We need to address the individuals who are going to be visiting Africa, engaging Africa. They must understand that Africans are equal to them. But when one goes to Africa with a sense of superiority, wherein lies the problem, because you are not going to engage those leaders who are going to come to the table as equals. You go in feeling superior, you come back feeling superior. That is not an issue with the Chinese. The Chinese are coming in. The Chinese, yes, if you don't negotiate with them and they win the game, then that's your fault. But they don't come in feeling superior. They understand that Africa has something they need. So they will come to the Africans. They will come and make sure that they let the Africans know that you matter to us, that our relationship with you does matter. That you don't get that feeling with the United States. You get the feeling that there's this sense of superiority, that you Africans, you ought to be glad that we are engaging you. You ought to be glad that we are inviting you to come to Washington. That sense of superiority,
I mean,
it has to...
colonialism all over again.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah. And I've said this before. It's just neo-colonialism part two. Part two for whatever you want to name it. But yeah, that's kind of the feeling. And I'm glad that Dr. Africana kind of calls that out. It's like, it's not genuine, in my opinion, of why all these administration figureheads and Kamala now going over. It's not in the sense of, you know, diplomacy or democracy, as they say. It's to say to them, we know better than you. We're going to take over. We're going to create the infrastructure in your countries. And you do not know any better. And we're just going to take your resources. And then you're going to have to deal with it. And the sad thing is, and we mentioned this in the US-Africa Summit, the leaders there are going to go along with it. Because at the end of the day, they're looking to enrich themselves at the expense of the people that they're supposed to lead. So kind of like the stereotypical, you know, Africa, you know, leaders, you know, are basically corrupt. Well, you can argue a lot of that is based upon the West and their relationship with the West and how much corruption they kind of bring in too. So, but yeah, I think I just wanted to play that just to kind of give an African perspective, you know, to all of this. Again, Dr. Africana was talking in regards to the US-Africa Summit, but again, she kind of mentions this in terms of post, you know, what she expects or hoping to expect coming
from
out of that
leaders
conference.
coming here, right?
And she basically said, you know, I'm not.
Well, what you told him.
Do not
was,
come.
That's what you told him.
Yeah.
I'm gonna come.
I do want to. I actually skipped a clip, but I think it's okay. No, I think it's okay.
Cool.
I have the meat that I really wanted to show.
You're over prepared.
A little bit, but I think, but I think it's a worthwhile interview to listen to anyway. It's about 25 minutes. So I'll link it in the description after this. But on the next slide, and I think this is kind of the crux of what I want to kind of get to, is she talks about how Africa can take advantage of all of this. And so I'm just going to let her tell it, and we can discuss after that.
The people.
Talk to me a little bit about how Africa can take advantage of its intellectual connection and assets to entrepreneurs who have left but may want to help Africa back, because this is one of your major initiatives.
Absolutely. The brain drain that started over 400 years ago, when the best and the brightest and the fittest were taken out of Africa forcibly, and that is when the brain drain started. I want to make sure that is very clear. And when we talk about African diaspora, we're talking about all people of African descent living outside of Africa. Let's be very clear. African Americans, they are Africans who were forcibly taken out of Africa, plus the continued brain drain, those who are later immigrants who left Africa running away from famine, from wars, in search of greener pastures. The end result is, as we speak, Africa has a serious deficit of expertise. Right. However, the good news for Africa is that we have a very young, intelligent, vibrant population that need opportunities. So when we can marry the age group of young, intelligent Africans with the expertise coming from the diaspora, we can see an Africa that can propel itself to take its rightful place on the world stage like it once was. So yes, the diaspora are an important component of Africa's development. Make no mistake about that. All the African leaders are fully aware of that. All the African leaders are in full support of coming up with programs to make it easier for the diaspora to move back. We want to look at diaspora who can come to Africa, not just focus on a country that you were born in, but if you are a person of African descent, Africa should matter to you. Africa should be your problem. You must own Africa's problems, understand it, and participate in the development of Africa. For when we have a stable Africa, it now also correlates with an African American who is anchored. It correlates with an Afro-Caribbean who is anchored. It correlates with an Afro-Latino who is anchored. Right. Currently, descendants of the formerly enslaved, they are like a ship without an anchor. The wind blows that way, here they go. Until they are anchored by being accepted by Africa, until they are anchored by participating in the development of Africa. The Jews do it, the Chinese do it, the Indians do it, the Irish do it, African Americans together with the continental Africans. We must make sure that we work together to participate in the development of Africa, because the development and the building of the Africa we want, it is our responsibility first and foremost, and ours alone. Right. Others are welcome to come join us. Others are welcome to help us. Others are welcome to engage us as equal partners, but we must own the building of the Africa that we want as a united front of the African diaspora.
So, in other words, sees the means of production, right?
Yeah, don't say that too loud. Don't say that too loud. That's quiet talk. You say that quietly. You know? Don't be talking about that. You got to read books that are banned to learn that. You know?
But I think she brings up the point, and actually that last clip is really the reason why I'm here, essentially, is the idea of, us in the diaspora, instead of all these politicians going over who do not have the best interests of the people at heart, are looking to exploit the continent more, who are looking to, who are in the pocket of lobbyists and the big banks and organizations that ultimately want to have a more of a foothold in Africa and ultimately kind of push China and now Russia out of the continent in lieu of enriching themselves. What Dr. Africana is saying, look, and I say this too, but I think obviously relatively, like if you're Black in the West, relatively, you have more opportunities here in a way that many people in Africa don't. And as we mentioned, and what was mentioned in the article, is Africa is young. So like the median age, depending on the country, is around 15 to 20. So it's a young population who I'd argue are very more involved. They're a little more internet savvy, and they are more willing to, at least in my experience, to be more open to different ideas and different way of doing things. But the problem is people like me are not necessarily going over there and talking to them. Who they're seeing is usually more white people who are usually more of a capitalist bent, who are looking to go over there and kind of take refuge in their countries and are essentially stealing the resources away to kind of benefit people here at the expense of the Africans who have essentially let them in their countries. That really should be people in the diaspora. So like if you're Black, if you're from Europe, Latin America, here, wherever, that should be our job to kind of step in with the experience and the tech expertise that we have to help build that infrastructure in Africa. So that's what she was saying, which I definitely relate and resonate with. So, and that's kind of my issue with China and Russia to a degree. It's not, and I've said this many times on this show, it's not that I'm necessarily pro or anti-China or Russia in terms of what's happening in Africa. I'm more pro-Africa in the sense of they have the issue of they have the resources, they need the development to do that on their own. And that's what this should be, the primary focus should be.
Yeah, I think China has, they're trying to build a big round table where they try to bring everybody in as kind of equals in the Belt and Road Initiative. So they will help build out infrastructure, but I think their main goal is just to give a lot of these African countries what they really need and ask them what they need so that they can be as prosperous as possible, because it helps everybody, including China, as trading partners. So I think that they will ultimately, most of the African nations will lean towards what China is offering. And to your point earlier, you said a lot of the African leaders they could end up getting bribed in a way by, the United States. That might work. But remember, the United States has this long track record of causing bloodshed and cooing and destabilizing. You're going to still get a lot of these leaders to say, you can't buy me off. We're getting off the petrodollar. We're just going to join China because we already know what a deal with the devil looks like.
Right.
So,
I think it depends on the country, and I think it depends on the politician over there.
Yes, of course.
Speaking of devils, that's almost a perfect segue to this right here. This guy, Joseph Biden. So this story is from Left Voice, right? Lesser evil. Biden wants more border patrol than MAGA Republicans. Over the weekend, Biden bragged about his support for even more resources than MAGA Republicans. Not just like we're equivocating this. No, he said specifically MAGA he said, okay, to secure the border on Twitter, this is lesser evilism in action. So Molly Rosenwig, this is the 28th, right? Yesterday. So Biden recently tweeted in support of even more resources to secure the border, contrasting himself with MAGA House Republicans who are proposing to slash funding for border security, his positioning himself to the right of more explicitly xenophobic and far-right MAGA branch of the Republican Party and their fear-mongering about fentanyl. The Biden administration's record shows that this statement doesn't come out of nowhere. It's implemented anti-immigration and violent border policies the whole time after cynically campaigning for human immigration policies in the 2020 election. While in the 2020 elections, Biden was forced to give lip service to immigrants' rights due to mass mobilizations against Trump's draconian immigration policies. Now Biden is showing his true xenophobic colors. Rob, I don't know if you remember this. I'm betting you do. But there was a particular guy who was the deporter in chief. Do you remember that guy?
Yeah.
Remember that guy?
Obama. Yep. Obama and Joe Biden VP. Yep. The deporters in chief.
So recently, I think what was it? Maybe a month or two ago, Collin, we covered Biden's actual the thing they're stating here, the actual anti-immigration policies.
Yeah, that was a couple months ago.
Yeah. Do you remember exactly what that was?
Shoot, I don't remember the exact clip. I know it has to deal.
It was something about the repeat something or other, that they were able to just push them back, and then they would get more in, something like that.
I'll look it up if you keep going.
So here's the tweet. MAGA House Republican proposals would slash funding for border security, a move that could allow nearly 900 pounds of fentanyl into our country. I mean, your son will be happy, but we need more resources to secure the border, not less. God, he sounds like a Republican to me. I don't know.
Yeah, when he runs in 2024, he's going to run on finish the wall.
Finish the wall. Make the wall great again. That's what it's going to be.
He's forgotten some of the things that he ran on, literally. That's exactly what's happening here. He has no recollection whatsoever of all the promises that he made.
It's crazy. So this comes after a recent agreement with Justin Trudeau that makes it easier for the U.S. and Canada to turn away asylum seekers. Furthermore, Biden has been deporting Russians who are escaping Putin's draft-seeking asylum, and only a few months ago announced severe restrictions on asylum seekers at the U.S.-Mexico border. The increasing emphasis on militarization of the border comes in the context of the global refugee crisis, largely fueled by imperialist intervention, the climate crisis, and environmental extraction. All the reasons why people are leaving places. So we just let in a bunch of Ukrainian refugees, though, didn't we? I hear. Not that long ago.
Yes.
But earlier this month, in his proposed budget for fiscal year 2024, he bragged on the White House fact sheet after having secured more resources for border security than any of the presidents who preceded him. Let's be clear. Biden is bragging that he is funding ICE, border walls, and other border patrol more than Donald Trump. Biden claimed that he would rebuild a safe, orderly, and humane immigration system that was gutted by the previous administration, although he has largely continued with Trump's draconian immigration policies, including keeping kids in cages. Where the fuck's AOC crying at? Those are still there.
I know. Damn, man, you stole my joke.
Where the fuck's she at? Oh, I remember. She's recruiting for the military. That's what she's doing now. Yay. Who could forget the images of border agents on horseback whipping Haitian asylum seekers, or how last summer over 50 migrants were found dead in a trailer in Texas in sweltering heat? We covered both of those things.
Yes.
So, yeah, we're not having a great batting average here. This is lesser evilism in action. This is left voice, by the way. Despite cries and crocodile tears from Biden and the Democrats about kids in cages and needing humane immigration policies, when election season rolls around, even the progressives of the squad haven't supported immigration rights. Instead, AOC is promoting the poverty draft, trying to get low-income black and brown kids to enlist in the military. Military academies, though, it's different. It's different. We need a party of the working class with a socialist program, an internationalist perspective, independent of both Democrats and Republicans, that fights for the attacks on migrants, for immigration rights, abolishing ICE, freedom of migration, and open borders. Let them all in. Thoughts?
So, quick update. So we talked about this on our Tough on the Border segment. I'll link it. But that's in regards to Title 42. which we did report on. So essentially, the Biden administration called that Title 42 policy obsolete under Trump. But then back in January, Biden announced to expand the migrant expulsion program that would essentially deny anyone based in Latin America access or seeking asylum in the country.
Yeah.
So,
temporary protection status, I think is what it's called. It revokes their ability to be held here while they're awaiting like their trial or whatever to be allowed into the country, and just kicks them right back to their country of origin.
So yeah.
Well,
so
I just don't know how. I mean, even Left Voice is claiming we need independent options here. You know, I just find it funny.
I think that Biden. Go ahead, man.
That arguing that like that Biden has any good in him anywhere, like what, like on almost every left ideal, he's terrible. So anyone willing to tell you to vote for that guy, or told you to vote for that guy, like should just not be listened to. You know.
Agreed.
So,
yeah, I think Biden's goal, or like his plan long term, to make sure that immigrants don't come to this country is just to make this country so fucking insufferable that nobody wants to come here. Because that's what we're on track for, man.
That makes sense. Well, you ready for your story, Care Bear?
1 second. I just got a recommendation for someone to interview in the chat. So shout out to Jamon 93. So he recommended a writer on Medium on Wale Dwayne Wong. Great writer on Medium. So yeah, I got his name down. We'll look into it.
Nice.
But yeah.
Indy Les, the only real person on Rumble, in the chat saying rumbly. So anyway,
all right.
We did talk about this with Indy on the last How Do We Miss That as well, I think.
Which is
this LA school workers thing.
Okay.
But from a different perspective. So we talked about it with solidarity strikes not happening with it.
And last week we discussed this. So this is more of an update. So they got a deal. But being a teacher and looking into it a little more with Indy, we're kind of like, not as good as a deal as you think it is. So we'll go more into that in this. So let me play catch up. There we go. So Common Dreams. This is written by Jessica Corbett. I think this might be the first article we've read from her, I believe.
I think I've done one.
Okay. But she writes, when we fight, we win. LA school workers secure deal after 3-day strike. The agreement addresses our key demands and sets us on a clear pathway to improve our livelihoods and securing the staffing we need to improve student services, said SEIU Local 99. And it continues, union negotiators for about 30,000 school support staffers in California's Los Angeles County struck a historic deal with the second largest district in the United States on Friday after a 3-day strike. Members of Service Employees International Union Local 99, including bus drivers, cafeteria workers, special education assistants, teaching aides, and other school staff, backed by about 35,000 educators of United Teachers Los Angeles, walked off the job on Tuesday and continued to strike through Thursday. The tentative contract agreement, which must still be voted on by SEIU Local 99 members, was reached with the Los Angeles Unified School District after mediation from Democratic Mayor Karen Bass. The deal would increase the average annual wage from $25,000 to $33,000, raise wages by 30%, boost the district minimum wage to $22.52, provide a $1,000 COVID COVID-19 pandemic bonus, secure healthcare benefits for part-time employees who work at least 4 hours a day, and guarantee 7 hours of work for special education assistants. The pathway addresses our key demands and sets us on a clear pathway to improving our livelihoods and securing the staffing we need to improve student services, SEIU Local 99 said in a statement. It was members' dedication to winning respect from the district that made this agreement possible. The Los Angeles Times reports that during a Friday news conference at City Hall with Bass and Alberto Calavajo, the LAUSD superintendent, Local 99 Executive Director Max Arias declared that here in California, this agreement will set new standards not just for Los Angeles, but the entire state. Zoom out, actually, yeah. I want to appreciate the 30,000 members that sacrificed 3 days of work, despite low income, to raise the issue to society that we as a society need to do better for all workers, all working people, for everyone, Arias added. While the strike meant to be about 400,000 K-12 students went in classes for 3 days this week, many parents stood in support of union employees, according to KTLA, with one local parent saying that it's obvious all over the schools that we're really not putting the support where it's needed, and our children are suffering because of that. In a series of tweets, Local 99 thanked people from across the country for their solidarity this past week and stressed that the LA mayor, who has no formal authority over LAUSD, was instrumental to getting the district to finally start hearing our demands. Bass, in a statement, thanked Arias and Calavajo for working together with me to put our families first and emphasized that we must continue working together to address our city's high cost of living, to grow opportunity, and to support more funding for LA's public schools, which are the most powerful deterrent of our city's future. Calavajo said Friday that when we started negotiating with SEIU, we promised to deliver on 3 goals. We want to honor and elevate the dignity of our workforce and correct well-known, decades-long inequities impacting the lowest age earners. We want to continue supporting critical services to our students. We want to protect the financial viability of the district for the long haul. Promises made, promises delivered.
A lot of flowery labor talk.
Thoughts on this before I'll go into the critique?
Well, I think we probably have a similar critique. What I got from this was basically like they're in LA. So what the headline stands out to me as, it's more like teachers go from getting a quarter of what they should get paid to going up to a third of what they should get paid. So it's like they got, so I mean it's gotta cost like $80,000 to $100,000 to live a decent life in LA, right? So they go from 25,000 to 33,000.
Someone in the chat can look that up for us. What the average what is that called? Like where you're actually able to cost of living in
I actually have
LA.
That.
Okay, never mind then.
So actually, let me read this last part and then we'll go into that. Contract talks with district teachers are ongoing. When announcing support for Local 99 strike earlier this month, UTLA President Cecilia Duarte Cruz said that despite LSUSD having one of the largest school budgets and largest reserves in the nation, teachers and essential school workers are struggling to support their own families and live in the communities they work for. The strike and pending deal in California comes amid a rejuvenated labor organizing movement across the United States, with employees of major corporations, including Amazon and Starbucks, fighting for unions. So let's go into this a little bit. So actually, I want to go back a second. Right here. So again, these are support workers. These are not teachers. So these are like the cafeteria workers, the bus drivers, my guess, custodial staff, the people who support,
who actually keep schools running, those people.
Yes. So average annual salary went from 25,000 to 33. So to give you context, if you do the math, that's about $15 an hour, which that's what people have been pushing this whole time. You know, like we need a $15 minimum wage, right?
Yep.
That's very different from a living wage. So I will pull that up. So I'm going to speed up a little bit.
Zoomies.
So we need to zoom in for this. I think this is this was produced by MIT, I believe. This chart. So actually, if you zoom out a bit, the living wage shown is the hourly rate that an individual in a household must earn to support his or herself and their family. The assumption is the sole provider is working full time. The tools provide information for individuals and households with 1 or 2 working families and 0 to 3 children. So right here, if we want to take a look, this is the living wage. So basically what you need in order to live in LA. So if you're single,
we're starting at with 0 kids and 1 adult, 21.22 like pesos, you know.
Yeah. So that's the living wage. So if you're single, no kids.
Yeah.
Right. So that's over, you know, as you could see, you notice that like if you have 1 adult and then if you go over, you know, 2 adults
3
working,
kids,
3
37.78.
kids,
Yeah.
So, but if you look at the columns where let's do this. Let's look at
what's the bottom numbers? Are these hourly? Is this what you need hourly at the bottom?
Yes.
1550, 1550, 50. Okay.
Right.
Whatever those are.
Right. So that's that, well, if you
I was reading.
Yeah. So that's the state minimum wage.
Yeah.
Basically at the bottom.
Yeah.
So they increased it to that.
To just over that, pretty much.
Just over that.
Yeah.
But given that,
like I think they gave them 20 was what the article said.
Well, initially it was 25,000, which I've lived on that.
No, I mean like 20 per hour. I think it did say
20 per hour. Yeah, 20 around $20 per hour.
So like,
but
you're already below the median, the cost of living,
right,
by $1 and change.
Right, and if you have kids, so basically the argument is, especially if you have kids, like you can make the argument. I could make the argument honestly, even if you're making $20 an hour, like in LA, that's still not enough.
No,
and if
that's
you can
MIT study,
right?
Like,
and if you have kids, you're definitely not making it even with 20. So so the idea of like, and this is kind of what makes me upset with our politicians who kind of pushing, you know, $15 an hour as like,
yeah, it's way too late for that.
Way too late and way too low at this point. Like we really should be pushing for at least 20 at this point. Because it's not even like, if you calculate that, that's around, even if you make 15, that's about $33,000 a year.
Why do you think, Collin, that these union organizations don't give like a ridiculous like request? Like, bro, $50 shoot for like $50 an hour. Like, I don't care if you don't get it. Like, we can come down from there. What are they gonna respond with? Like, nah, man, like 30 would be okay. Fine, sold, done. Like, you know.
No, Joe Biden and the Democrats would come in and pass a law to make it illegal, and then they'll force them all back, like with pitchforks. Get back in there, janitor.
But this is the issue with, and again, I say this as currently part of a union myself, but this is one of the issues that I do have with unions, because often they lowball, or very much like in Democrat fashion, they'll start with the compromise and then work their way down. And then the expectation is the little bit or the incremental that they get is worth celebrating. When the reality is, given this is nothing to celebrate about. And my guess is, given that it's LA, who will this affect? This will probably more likely affect women and people of color.
Yeah.
So they're still going to make, you can make the argument it's slightly better, but it's still like
the PMC class going to be all right. You mean that's
yes.
Okay.
Yeah. This is still essentially, I would argue, the working poor.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not, and I'm saying this for someone who made, when I came out of college and I had a degree, $25,000 a year.
Hey man, you can afford cake on $15 an hour, bro.
But keep in mind, like for me, when I was making that was in 2004.
Yeah.
You know, times have changed now. This is almost 20 years. And the idea that like, it's insanity to me that people are giving this much money as a salary and probably no benefits to boot.
Yeah.
I think it's sad.
Yeah.
You know, that it's probably even sad that people feel for whatever reason that they take these jobs, which are often hard, often low, often like long hours, but this is what the working poor is usually subjected to. So it's hard because on one hand, I don't want to dismiss the victory, quote unquote, that these people have. But on the other end, I'm like, you gotta do this. This ain't it for me. Speaking as a teacher and speaking as a person who once upon a time made these salaries, and I was single, I'm still single, but single, struggling with that salary. I can't imagine you being able to do that with a kid without having to take on 2 or 3 other jobs in order to try and make it, especially in LA.
Or you could sell one of your organs on the black market. That's one of the things we're doing in this country now. You got 2 kidneys.
Javelins, you can get that and it'll be fine. Javelins on eBay, buy a liver.
I would venture that if you were, I would guess that if you were to look at the last time those same workers got a raise in that union, and then look at the difference of how their wages are going up over the last couple of decades, you would find out that their wages are going up slower than inflation. So what means is actually happening is they're actually fighting for less than you would get simply if we adjusted all wages to keep up with the price of gas or a gallon of milk and stuff like that. So like if you're in LA and a gallon of gas last year or 2 years ago was $4, and now I've seen it up at $7.
Right.
That's almost double. So if that's the case, then the people making $25,000 a year, if they want to keep up with their amount of gas that they're putting in their car, they should be making 40,000, minimum 45,000, right? To keep up with that. So what you would find, I think, if you went back and checked, is that these little victories, they allow the elites, the owners of this country, they allow these little victories to happen simply because they understand that these people aren't really getting so much a raise as they're just kind of getting a little more than they used to have. Right. And it's not even keeping up with the price of consumer goods. Yeah. So this isn't really a victory. You guys are still not getting paid nearly what you should. And the raise that they just fought for is so much less than the inflation that's going on in this country right now. It doesn't keep up with it.
And the sad thing is Karen Bass went for this.
Yeah.
That's the sad thing. This is a progressive mayor.
Yeah.
Allegedly who went.
And they're going to use it. They're going to use it as like a bludgeon all the time. Like, well, we gave you the like, and it's like,
yeah.
They're gonna, they're gonna stump on it.
You can get this little teeny tiny crumb. You guys should all do that.
Workers. We fought for them. Like, it's gonna be terrible. Anyway, speaking of terrible, uranium bombs. Like, which with both of you who are around small children frequently, this is gonna suck. Just be warned, viewer discretion coming up. But yeah,
is this going to be similar to that drone video you made me watch?
Not as bad, no.
It's not cool. It's still not cool.
It's not good. No, it's worse in a different way. But so I wanted to bring attention to something that the British are now sending over to Ukraine as well as us. We use these as well. In fact, members who are in and around Hawaii know of this all too well, because we test these things on their islands. So still, like right under those telescopes, like right down there. Ask them how well this is going. But so Army is putting the outrageous spin on depleted uranium science. Scientists cited by British military to justify sending depleted uranium shells to Ukraine had previously criticized use of such ammunition in Iraq.
God.
So not only are they lying, but they're like double lying, kinda, you know? Like, it's like a double lie. They're lying that the fact that they told the truth earlier and now have to lie. Anyway.
Yeah, it's like back in the day when mainstream media was talking about how Azov are actual Nazis and the Ukraine government is infiltrated with Nazis back in like 2013.
Yep,
and then and then nowadays they come out, no, there's no Nazis. What are you talking about?
You know where I learned about that
Nazis,
Hawaii
they're
thing?
actually nice Nazis. They're good. They're reformed.
Was in Vice. That's where it was at. That's where I learned about it. So a couple of bullet points. Sole body cited by UK military to defend Ukraine receiving depleted uranium weapons has not published new research on the subject for over 20 years. Okay. Italy's defense ministry has compensated soldiers who developed cancer after exposure to depleted uranium on service in the Balkans. Okay. After the invasion of Iraq, the UK military accepted it had a moral obligation to help clear depleted uranium debris from the rounds it had fired. So that's the UK military who is now sending it where? Ukraine. Okay. Ministry of Defense claimed last week that research by the Royal Society, Britain's premier scientific group, supported its controversial decision to send depleting uranium tank shells to Ukraine. An MOD official briefed the media. Independent research by scientists from groups such as the Royal Society has assessed that any impact to personal health and the environment for the use of depleted uranium munitions is likely to be low. Like, that's what they're saying now. Royal Society was cited despite the group rebuking the Pentagon in 2003 for using their exact same research to justify American tanks firing the weapon in Iraq. So they complained at us doing it. So again, viewer discretion, it gets rough ahead. I just want you to know that, like, there are kids in these areas that can be affected by this pretty easily. You know, like radiation causes birth defects and such. So this is Australia's Channel 10. We're talking about it after the Iraq stuff. So I will play that and do this and this.
Well, tonight's late news special report is about an Australian woman who has spent the past 2 days walking the corridors of power to educate politicians in Canberra about what she believes are the horrific effects of exposure to depleted uranium. The US military has been using the chemical since the Gulf War. The international community will soon vote at the United Nations, urging more transparency on the use of depleted uranium weapons. Australia plans to abstain on that vote, but Donna Mulhern wants to change all that. In a moment, I'll be speaking to her, but first, Leah Craven has her story. And a warning, there are some distressing images in this report.
Is this the toxic legacy of the Iraq War? Parents bury their fourth child. 2 were stillborn, 2 died soon after birth. This is life in the city of Fallujah, where doctors report an unprecedented surge in birth defects. They blame a chemical used by the US military, depleted uranium.
So there is contamination.
One round of depleted uranium can pierce a tank's thick armour, leaving only a burned-out shell. Australian peace activist Donna Mulhern was in Iraq when the war began as a human shield. On 3 subsequent trips, she has documented the increase in infant mortality, congenital birth defects, leukemia and cancer.
Today we have a little baby girl who was born just 1 hour ago, and she has birth defects connected with the spine, neuro defects. She also has an enlarged skull.
Helpless parents camp out in hospital.
That's the face of a woman watching her baby die.
Most of the photos Donna took of babies in Fallujah City Hospital are too shocking to broadcast. But for paediatrician Dr. Samira Alani, it's her daily reality.
I have recorded 30 cases.
In 1 month?
In 1 month.
The US military acknowledges that it has used depleted uranium in Iraq. This statement from 2003 boasts that a depleted uranium round had penetrated directly through a sand dune to demolish a tank hiding behind it. At the same time, a US Defence Health official said, "There is no substantial evidence to suggest that depleted uranium is the source of any particular illness from the Gulf War." Australia's Foreign Minister Bob Carr says the government pays close attention to studies, but points out there aren't definitive links between health effects and exposure to the chemical.
If there's no link, what caused this? The difference between the figures before 2004 and after have changed dramatically.
Donna's on the warpath to increase awareness and hopes her personal experience will make an impact. She's lobbying the Australian government to vote for greater transparency about the use of depleted uranium at the United Nations later this month.
For more on this, I'm joined now from Canberra by peace activist and author Donna Mulhern, who is leading the campaign in Australia for a vote against the use of depleted uranium weapons. Donna, thanks for joining us. Look, you were among several Australian human shields to visit Iraq when the war began, and you've since spent a great deal of time on the ground there. Just how significant is the birth deformity crisis in Iraq?
I'd say it's extremely significant. We've got examples where in some communities we're seeing up to 30 cases every month of very severe birth deformities. An example is the city of Fallujah. So 30 a month is 1 to 2 a day. That's 700 in a year. That's almost 1/3 of all births. There's also a very high level of
1/3. That's ridiculous.
Women miscarrying and a very high level of women giving birth to babies who are stillborn.
But Donna, what evidence is there? Is the evidence there to suggest that these birth deformities are being caused by the use of depleted uranium?
Well, certainly we have evidence of the use of depleted uranium in certain areas in Iraq, such as in Baghdad in 2003 and 4, and there's been more than 400,000 kilograms of depleted uranium dispersed throughout these communities. It's also alleged that depleted uranium was used in the attacks in the city of Fallujah in 2004. A researcher found that the health problems in Fallujah connected with uranium are even more severe than Hiroshima and Nagasaki after the atomic weapons were dropped there.
You've spent a great deal of time in the hospitals in Fallujah, as you've mentioned, west of Baghdad. The misery that you see, Donna, in the eyes of the children in those hospitals, I would imagine would be something that'll be very, very difficult to ever leave behind.
It's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking, especially when the women look at you and seem to want some kind of answer or solution. And the advice to the women of Fallujah from the head gynaecologist at the moment, the official medical recommendation is just stop, as in don't fall pregnant, because it's likely you won't give birth to a healthy child. So that's devastating for many women to hear. And what they're saying is, we'll wait till there's a solution, and when a solution comes, things will get better. Of course, because we're talking about uranium, there is no solution. This is a sentence on this community that's going to last about 500 million years, and that is heartbreaking. There's nothing sadder than the face of a woman watching her baby die. And I saw many of those faces recently when I was in Fallujah. When the tanks and the guns are packed up and the armies go home, they've left a legacy. And it's a toxic, radioactive legacy that these communities have to then live with.
Good luck with the campaign. Donna Mulhern, thank you.
Well, sorry to bum both of you out. I apologize. But you know, all fair's in war, I guess. What do you think?
Well, I think that all those people that care so much about Ukraine and Ukrainians that have that Ukraine flag in their bio should think a little bit on this decision, because this is, of course, if we're sending a whole bunch of depleted uranium rounds for taking out Russian tanks, it means that a lot of Ukrainian towns and Ukrainians are going to end up with this exact same thing happening. So let's think this through, guys. You don't have to have uranium tipped rounds. You can do tungsten tipped rounds. They even say that. I think we're going to read about it just in a slide or two. So they don't even have to do it. What I think is happening here is that the UK, NATO, the West in general is trying to prod Russia by sending the most disgusting things they can over there. Basically, like that. You know, you have two siblings in the back of the car, and one of them's like putting their finger in the other one's face, going, "I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you." This is one of those things where it's like, the thing that falls just short of radioactive nuclear weapons is radioactive rounds like this. So the U.S., I think, in a real way, is prodding Russia to retaliate. And I think that's part of the reason they're doing that. Because if they just wanted,
they're already complaining about that. They're already complaining that they're moving nuclear charges, like, you know.
Yeah.
So
I think this is just escalation for the sake of like trying to goad Russia into doing something.
Their breakthrough innovative tanks either. They're using a T-64 main battle tank. They're using old stuff. It's all been old. They're not sending their best stuff out first. Like, they're like, let's hope these blunderbusses work. You know, like,
and if they start to actually use these rounds in Ukraine, you're going to see exactly the type of birth defects you saw in Fallujah. And then all these people that have been, you know, so bravely cheering for the brave Ukrainians, putting the flag in their bio, you're going to have to answer some questions when 5-10 years from now, all these Ukrainian babies are turning out like this. Is this really worth it? Is this really worth it? Like, we need to do some serious analysis here. This is seriously fucked up. It really is. And you need to, some of these people need to do some soul searching and decide if this is really worth it.
Couldn't agree more. When contacted, the scientific body told us in 2001-02, the Royal Society published 2 reports on the health hazards of depleted uranium munitions and provided links for the first and second report. Your spokesman added that depleted uranium isn't an active area of policy research for the Society, and we haven't updated or published on this topic since those reports. In 2003, the U.S. military used these Royal Society reports to defend the use of depleted uranium by coalition forces in Iraq. Right, we're now 2023. This is literally 20 years ago. Way to feel old, people. Like, this was, Iraq doesn't seem that long ago to me. I don't know about you, but I mean, what does Jimmy say? He gets a gold watch now? Isn't that it?
I think so, yeah.
So that triggered a complaint to the media when The Guardian, saying the Royal Society was incensed because the Pentagon had claimed it had the backing of the Society and saying DU was not dangerous, which we just saw in that clip. They literally used that like talking point from government officials. In fact, the Society said both soldiers and civilians were in short and long-term danger. Children playing on contaminated sites were particularly at risk. The chairman of the Royal Society's Working Group on Depleted Uranium, Professor Brian Spratt, was quoted as warning that a small number of soldiers might suffer kidney damage and an increased risk of lung cancer if substantial amounts of depleted uranium are breathed in, for instance, inside an armored vehicle hit by a depleted uranium penetrator. In addition, large numbers of corroding depleted uranium penetrators embedded in the ground might pose a long-term threat if the uranium leaches into water supplies. He recommended that fragments from depleted uranium shells should be cleared up and long-term sampling of water supplies needed to be conducted. Spratt also countered claims about the safety of depleted uranium made by the UK's then Defense Secretary, Geoff Hoon, stressing it is likely that unsatisfactory to deploy a large amount of material that is weakly radioactive and chemically toxic without knowing how much soldiers and civilians have been exposed to it. So bit of cherry-picked research. Doug Weir, research director at the Conflict and Environmental Observatory, told Declassified that MOD's latest spin on the Royal Society's research was pretty outrageous, but not unprecedented. Weir edited a report in 2012 for the Campaign Against Depleted Uranium, which said the MOD had cherry-picked research outcomes that maintained a view of DU as acceptable, despite a growing body of scientific evidence that highlighted uncertainty and recommended precaution. He recalled how a defense minister had once told MPs that an MOD review had found that the use of DU was permissible under the Geneva Conventions, when in fact no such review had found the use of DU as permissible under the Geneva Conventions, when in fact no such review had been undertaken at that point. What they didn't do was study civilian exposure anywhere. 0 civilian tests. Weir acknowledged that MOD had conducted some of its own research on DU's impact after invading Iraq, but what they didn't do was study civilian exposure anywhere. Depleted uranium is a chemically toxic and radioactive heavy metal produced as waste from nuclear power plants. You know, like the Chernobyl one that sent a bunch of it flying everywhere. Anyway, the military uses it for tank-piercing shells because it's extremely dense, like the fucking brains they got. However, scientific debate continues about its long-term risks to human health and the environment in post-conflict zones. That's like giving someone like a deadly virus to cure their cold, in my opinion. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
Anyway, shells containing more than 2.3 tons of depleted uranium were fired by British forces in operations against Iraq in 1991 and 2003. So they got 20 years of study on this. U.S. troops fired far larger quantities, especially around the city of Fallujah, where it has been blamed for birth defects and a spike in cancer cases. The ammunition was also used by NATO operations in Bosnia, Serbia, Montenegro, and Kosovo during the breakup of Yugoslavia. Italian soldiers who developed cancer after serving on those missions in the Balkans has successfully sued their defense ministry for compensation. Serbians have attempted similar litigation against NATO. A study conducted in Kosovo by the UN Environmental Program shortly after that conflict ended found only low levels of radioactivity. Low levels of radioactivity.
Sure. Where have we heard this recently?
Like everywhere. East Palestine specifically.
Yep.
So, however, they were not able to consider the long-term consequences and only inspected 11 out of the 112 sites where DU had been fired. A later UNEP study in Serbia did find more significant corrosion of DU shells and that many of them were lodged deep in the ground. A subsequent report by the UN in Bosnia found drinking water had been contaminated, albeit at low levels. Where have we heard that before? After the invasion of Iraq, the MOD said, morally, we do recognize an obligation to help Iraq clear DU debris. Like, we got to clean it up. From the approximately 420 rounds it had fired. Someone chose that number specifically.
We recognize that we have something to do, but we're not going to do it.
Yeah.
It's too costly.
8 contaminated vehicles were moved, and the UK's Department of International Development did provide some funding for further clearance efforts, but it proved inadequate with disposal teams lacking radiation meters. They literally don't even have radiation meters. As in, AKA Geiger counters. Like those things. Like, the Kremlin has reacted furiously to the revelation that Britain is supplying depleted uranium to Ukraine, even though Russia upgraded some of its own tanks to fire the weapon in 2018. In justifying the supply of DU shells in Ukraine, UK Defense Minister Baroness Goldie said the rounds are highly effective in defeating modern tanks and armored vehicles. However, her statement appears to contradict disparaging comments the British military has made about Russia's armored capabilities. I love when they pull like their own crap and use it, you know. So they've all been saying, oh yeah, Russia's not sending good tanks, you know. Ministers have repeatedly celebrated success of UK supplied shoulder-launched missiles at destroying Russian tanks. The MOD told Parliament yesterday Russia has lost 1,900 main battle tanks during the war in Ukraine, and MOD Defense Intelligence said earlier this month the Russian military has continued to respond to heavy armored vehicle losses by deploying 60-year-old T-62 main battle tanks. It described the vehicles as, quote, vintage and lacking in modern armor. A model of armored personnel carrier first fielded in 1954 was also now being deployed by Russia in Ukraine. That's what they're using. This suggests DU shells are not essential. Tanks supplied by Germany to Ukraine use armor-piercing rounds made from tungsten instead. The MOD was asked for comment. You think they gave one?
No way.
Do either of you know how shape charges work?
No.
Okay, so an RPG, classic shape charge, right? I'll actually go back to picture of the depleted uranium one because it is a shape charge. So here we go. You got this. Here's the depleted uranium. Okay, right here. Okay, it's pretty much like this whole thing, mainly a stainless steel tip, maybe, right? And then you have, propellant, essentially, whatever that's going to be. In this case, gunpowder, well, and it's going to rifle its way down a barrel. But like, this is going to go that way, right? So this explosive is only used to shove this, right? So you see how it's like inversely shaped, right? Yeah. I want you to imagine this little triangle here and this little triangle here, reverse that, right? So this becomes a needle, normally tungsten in the case of RPGs, right? But this time it's a hot molten uranium needle. Okay, so that's what's being applied. So you can also use tungsten to make a hot metal tungsten needle, right? It's why you see our tanks on the front of them have this metal grill, right? So shape charge hits the grill, that needle gets detonated in front of the actual tank as opposed to like right on the metal.
Right.
So yeah, standard stuff. But slightly radioactively flavored. Anyway,
all's fair in war, I suppose.
Sure. Like I asked Nagasaki how that goes. Probably not great.
Yeah, let's see if all those people that care so much about the Ukrainian people start to regret these decisions 5 years from now when a whole bunch of Ukrainian babies are, being born with birth defects. When it's clear that there's an alternative, you don't need uranium armor piercing rounds. You could use the tungsten piercing rounds. Again, it seems like a clear provocation. They're trying to provoke Putin into doing something stupid. And it might be as simple as they might be just trying to get him to also use them. You know what I'm saying? So they can turn, so they can turn around and go, "Oh, he's using radioactive rounds."
Well, they use them,
and then
before
they can escalate further. And
Like,
so, what I'm counting on, and I'm hoping that this is the case, is that that the Chinese and the Russians just kind of wait out the clock. Russia's going to win the war. It's a matter of time, not a matter of if. And they need to not react too rashly to anything that the U.S. is clearly doing to try to provoke a response.
Yeah.
So this is one of those things. That's what I think they're doing. It's clearly to try to provoke some sort of, they want the Russians to do something really inhumane or do something that is an actual war crime they can document on the battlefield, and then they'll go and run with it in the press as if Putin's, done something insane, and they'll conveniently leave out the part that they provoked it. That's how that's how this game works.
Well, we all
so
know
hopefully
I
think he won't. I think
that second nuclear bomb was all for Russia. So, that's the classic quote. But
crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we're the only people who use those. Like, I don't think we get to
heroically.
Talk about...
We heroically ended World War II by
God.
Destroying 150,000 people and millions more with birth defects afterwards. Nobody nobody in our country pays that price.
Hey, we got great anime and Godzilla from that. All right.
Yeah.
We still profited. But anyway, that's it. That's all we got.
Yeah, man. I unfortunately I got to get going. My daughter is in the next room. I can hear her, and she's calling for me. But I appreciate you guys having me back on. It's been a blast.
Yeah,
we'll do some more in the near future.
Yeah, we definitely should. So before
Tell
you
people
go,
where they can find you.
Yes.
My Twitter handle is @RealRobDurden, and I'm going to be uploading mostly to Rumble and Rockfin in the near future. I'm only going to be doing my book club on YouTube, and I might get another strike for like right in the middle of a chapter. I might make an off-color comment or something that they give me a strike for. They're looking for a reason, but I'll keep uploading my book club as long as they'll have me on YouTube. But I'm definitely moving on to Rockfin and Rumble mostly.
And we have at least your LinkedIn and your Rumble link, since you're going to be prioritizing that now in the description, so people can find you or get reacquainted with you again. So
tomorrow, we have premiering an episode we recorded yesterday, with Jay Buffont about the anti-homosexual bill in Uganda. So that should be, check that out tomorrow. When does that air?
At 6 p.m.
Eastern. Yep. So check that out. So we'll put another clip out Friday, Sunday. How do we miss that? Otherwise, I think that's just about it. Anything else? Cover everything?
Yeah. Happy birthday to INN News.
Yep. Here's to another year, fam. As always, labels are bad. Stay independent. Good night, fam.
We want to talk right down to earth in a language that everybody here can easily understand.